Good morning. Boy, for a Monday morning at 8 o'clock, you are fired up. Excellent. So my name is Ed Johnson. I am chair of the board of Second Nature. And on behalf of Second Nature and the board, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 2017 Summit. Second Nature is honored to serve you, your institutions, and your organizations as you continue to relentlessly reduce our carbon footprints while teaching and modeling a more sustainable world. So the summit metaphor is apt this morning as we reflect on the base camp that we established 10 years ago through the leadership of presidents of almost 700 colleges and universities. As a higher education historian, I can assure you that this has never happened before, to bring 2-year, 4-year public and private institutions together for a common goal to serve anything but Title IV increases. And we are still climbing together. We have a long way to go, and we're certainly trailblazing our own paths, but we can see the summit from here. And I have great faith, and I know you have great faith, that we will reach it together. And we will inspire many other institutions, higher education and otherwise, to emulate your work and achieve your noble goals. For those who now seek to roll back our nation's and our planet's commitment to reducing what we do, we must relentlessly say to them, it's too late. We are on the right side of history. If our national government won't lead, other governments will, as well as other public and private institutions. The business community and the energy and the technology markets are saying every day, it's too late. There are no alternative facts for the future of our planet and its species. So I love these gatherings for many reasons, but this year I'm particularly grateful for the renewable energy we give to each other, energy that will sustain us as fearless leaders and implementers. And we are all grateful for the tireless work behind the scenes for all the staff who have put this great event together. So welcome to my home state, welcome to the summit, and on behalf of our exciting speakers, presentations, and dialogues, welcome to the future. I'd now like to introduce the president of Second Nature, Dr. Tim Carter.
Thanks, Ed, and welcome everybody. We're really excited that you're here. I wanted to take just 1 second to do 2 thank yous. One is to all the Second Nature staff. If you're in the room, could you stand up? These things don't happen on their own. So we really appreciate all the staff's work, not only for the network or for this event. Michelle Medea really led the effort on our staff, and we're really grateful for that. Obviously, we don't do this every year, so it's not a dialed-in thing for us, and so it does take a lot of work for us to pull this off. So we're really thankful for staff. The second thank you I wanted to do is for the steering committee. If you're on the steering committee of the Climate Leadership Network, would you please stand? So this is a group of the leading presidents that have stepped up to volunteer their time to make this change possible. We met yesterday, a great discussion around the future of the network. Vim Vivel was the last 2 years ago, was the chair of that steering committee. Diane Harrison is now the chair of the steering committee, and Mariko Silver, who you'll hear from in a second, is the vice chair. So these officers have really, as a sitting president, there's a lot of demands on your time, and the fact that they're willing to lead this network is really important. Last thing I'll say is I apologize in advance for not shaking anyone's hands. I said this last night, but last week I actually broke both of my wrists, and I'm still in recovery. So it'll be a lot more hugs and a lot more fist bumps for everybody. Planning for the summit began over a year ago with really the theme of celebrating 10 years of the commitments and looking ahead to the future of climate leadership in higher education. We had just worked with the White House to produce the American Campuses Act on Climate Pledge, which many of the schools in the room have signed. And the historic Paris Agreement was just completed. We really thought that we had locked in real and sustained climate progress. And Second Nature continued over the next spring to bridge these federal campus relationships. We announced a clean energy ministerial group that was focused on innovation through the Campus Clean Tech Pilots program. We helped host a follow-up White House event with a number of presidents that attended. And there's assumption that we had really rounded a corner on our climate work, and that some level of federal support would continue with the new administration. And then, of course, November 8th happened. The world changed. Immediately after the election, many people were calling it a black swan event. Some of you might be familiar with that term. It's basically this idea that these events that seemingly come out of nowhere, they have huge impact, and then in retrospect, you can actually rationalize how they worked. This election was viewed that way. And in some ways, that really was true. Much ink has been spilled on this topic of could we have seen this type of leader coming into office here in the United States? But instead of focusing on explaining what happened or spending our time thinking about why it happened, in some ways I think it's more important for us to think about our response to the event, and not thinking about the event itself, but could we have what we could term a black swan response? So an unexpected and unanticipated and highly impactful response to an event that wasn't really on our radar. With the lack of federal climate leadership, can we actually accelerate climate progress faster than before? Is that possible? Would that be a possible black swan response? Can we mobilize climate solutions across institutional and jurisdictional boundaries in a way that was previously unthinkable? Can we go beyond placation or platitudes to continue the deep grind and hard work needed for systemic and transformative change? Have we challenged our own assumptions frequently enough and with enough rigor to ensure progress simply isn't a fragile truce, but a long-term, robust solution? And then we have to say, who is positioned to answer these questions? Who is capable of the black swan climate response? And I think for higher education, the answer is clear. You are the ones that can do this. You are the network to answer these questions. You are the network that can scale solutions. You are the network with senior leadership committed to transformative change. There really isn't anyone else in higher ed doing this. You are it. And so we can drive climate action nationally. We have to. This is what the Climate Leadership Network was built for, this moment. So the steering committee, yesterday asked this question: what does climate leadership look like in 2017? It's a legitimate question. In some ways, it has a simple answer. It looks like the network boldly acting on their commitments. And are we willing to do that? This is the question for the day. And hopefully the question for the next 2 days that we'll be able to chew on a little bit. Are we going to embrace that challenge? Are we going to embrace the black swan response? Or are we going to play defense? Are we going to step back and say, we just want to protect what we have? I actually think there's no better time now to embrace and grow into this leading performance role. And I'd actually go a step further and say, if we don't, as a network, embrace and grow into that leading performance role, we've done a disservice to the past 10 years of the commitments. Second Nature is committed to help accelerate signatory performance through scale and innovation. In 2016 alone, we brought in over $1.5 million to signatory institutions, directly to signatory institutions, and we don't intend to slow down this type of support. I'll just give you one example. When we think about scale and renewable energy, obviously that's an essential part of campuses meeting their climate goals. It can be economically challenging at a small scale. So aggregation may be one of the keys to unlocking this challenge. And in the upcoming year, Second Nature is working closely with one of our corporate partners, Customer First Renewables, to bring more aggregated renewable energy projects online. So for smaller schools and larger schools together, you can actually scale your impact. We just released a white paper, which is somewhere in this complex, which you can be happy to look at, and you can be hearing more about that at their session. I don't know if Gary, you here in the room? Okay, so, be in touch with me or Gary if you're interested in this aggregated renewable energy. This is a big focus for us, and it's something that campuses have to do. It is one of the essential parts of advancing progress. In other cases, known solutions are really prevented from happening through regulatory or political challenges. And clearly at the federal scale, that's going to be an issue. But really, state and local governments is where a lot of this policy work was happening and climate action was taking place. And so in the upcoming year, we're really focused on, with the presidential leadership, of activating that voice. And in the past, we can look to precedent projects that we've done. In the New York State, for example, we worked with Cornell, RIT, SUNY, and others to really help move the early stages of the needle on credit for renewable energy projects, how they accounted for their renewable energy. And post-election, we worked with we worked with all the community, but with over 230 presidents, they actually signed a letter to the incoming administration and Congress about the importance of climate action. So this policy question is reflective of the fact that senior leadership plays a critical role in advancing that voice. But it can't be done just by senior leadership. You need to be informed by the needs of the network. So this joining together of implementation staff, of signatory needs, and senior leadership voice is an important step for us as we mature and grow. I think it's also important to recognize speaking with one voice doesn't always mean using the same language. We have a diverse network. That's our strength. We have many different types of institutions. The New York Times a few weeks ago had an article about farmers in the Midwest taking climate action without using the word climate. And in some of our campuses, that is a necessary part of climate action. How do you take action without even using those words? If that gets us to the outcomes we're seeking, let's embrace that diversity and that challenge. Outcomes, in this case, beat the orthodoxy. So, in closing, we can still celebrate the campaign of our first 10 years that has been widely recognized as a success and really created this robust and strong climate leadership network. Now, more than ever, we need the network's collective, and I would argue, urgent black swan response to create a future that may seem inconceivable now, but we must believe is possible. It's up to us, it's up to you to make this happen. We hope this week challenges you. We hope this week encourages you. And we hope this week gives you hope and inspiration to embrace this critical work together in the years ahead. Thank you very much. So I'm going to stay up here and introduce our next speaker, Mariko Silver. Many of you know Mariko. She's the president of Bennington College, and she's the vice chair of our steering committee. It's been really an honor for me to get to know Mariko over the past couple years, and her leadership is readily apparent. She was at Arizona State prior to being at Bennington, so she's familiar with the warm climes of Tempe. She previously held roles in the Obama administration and in the administration of Arizona's Governor Janet Napolitano and at Columbia University. She served as acting Assistant Secretary for International Affairs and Deputy Assistant Secretary for International Policy at Homeland Security, and she spearheaded the creation of the first departmental-wide international strategy, managed the department's international engagements, and co-developed a global initiative to enhance aviation security. In these capacities, she's worked with multiple communities and constituencies around the world and very close to home. I can tell you her perspective at the federal level, at the local level, and most importantly at the artistic level is much appreciated on the steering committee. So Mariko, thanks again for volunteering your time for us, and we're so appreciative of your leadership.
Definitely the shortest person to come to this podium yet this morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Tim. So I won't take too much of your time because 3 welcomes is a whole lot of welcomes, but I do want to welcome you on behalf of the steering committee. And to build a little bit on what Tim said, at Bennington, as at many of your institutions, we're constantly telling our students that if they ask the right questions, develop the right skills, learn the right strategies and tactics, find the right collaborators, and use the right tools, they have the power to change the world. Big ways, small ways, globally and locally. And the reason that they have that kind of power to affect change is that institutions, as impersonal as they may sometimes seem, no matter how immovable and inevitable they appear, they're built by people. And that means they can be transformed by people too. In good ways, maybe in not so good ways. But in the end, we're all people, just like the people in power. And to my mind, this central aspect of what we do and what we teach is why presidents, leaders of institutions, matter when it comes to climate action. It's not necessarily that we're able as individuals to find solutions to all the problems that are so much bigger than ourselves and our institutions. Mine happens to be a very small institution, so I'm very well aware of this, particularly coming from ASU, which is a very big institution. But whether we lead the largest public university in the country, ASU, or a small liberal arts college like Bennington, or any of the many types of organizations represented by the people in this room, we all have the opportunity to lead by example, to show that change is indeed possible. And if we don't do this, what are we teaching? But this means declaring our commitment to meaningful action, in this case, essentially, importantly, critically, on climate change. First, as a statement of our values, but also, and perhaps more importantly, signaling to our students, our faculty, and our staff that every single person has a role to play in working on the problem and finding solutions. In other words, when it comes to issues like sustainability, we are both leaders and catalysts. We must both drive the change, but also create the spark so that this work is happening at all levels, everywhere. This was the thinking behind the Climate Leadership Network and the reason that so many institutional leaders signed on to Second Nature's leadership commitments over the past 10 years. As institutions of higher learning, we know that we have a special role. We certainly like to think that we have a special role to play and a special responsibility. We're where much of the scientific knowledge, cultural study, and political analysis around climate change are produced. We are the people responsible for training the next generation of thinkers, makers, doers, who will have to tackle this problem. And while we can't always, as individual institutions, change the world on our own, and we certainly can't, as individual institutions, stop climate change, as a network, our individual campuses and our network together can build momentum and have a greater impact, both as leaders of values and leaders of science, and as teachers, and by demonstrating to others how they too can have an impact. We can motivate and influence our peer institutions, including those that are not themselves higher ed institutions. We can influence and motivate other sectors. And of course, most importantly, we can influence and motivate and be motivated by our students. A quick look at some of the winners of the Second Nature Climate Leadership Awards, whom we'll hear about over the course of the next couple of days, shows the creativity and innovation around climate action that is happening on campuses around the country. Solutions that can be scaled and experimented with in other contexts. I won't go through the list of winners here, but in 2016 alone, it includes mentions of all kinds of higher ed institutions, from the large to the small, the public, the private, 2-year, 4-year, technical, liberal arts, et cetera. And as Tim said, I challenge you to think of another higher ed network that brings together such a diversity of schools. And what is even more extraordinary is that we are unified in our purpose, if not always in our methods. And our purpose is larger than ourselves. So it's important at this 10-year mark of the network to reflect on these successes and celebrate the ways we've had an impact. But it's equally important, of course, to think about where we go from here. Without getting into details, the political moment, the scientific moment, the climate moment, all are very different from the ones in which this group was founded. And at the steering committee meeting yesterday, we all agreed we need to do this work now more than ever. And if we're going to be successful, we need to do it together. We can see this in the letter composed by colleges, universities, and Second Nature, sent to the new Congress and incoming presidential transition team on January 17th, 2017, affirming our commitment to pursuing climate action with renewed vigor and demanding that our government do the same. But that's just a first step. There is much, much more to do. And we will only be successful if we do it together. So I encourage all of us to use the power of this network in big and small ways to move the needle on climate change, both in our own communities and with our students, in our states, in our communities, and nationally as well. This is the power of the network. So thank you for being here.